Hey friends, Jess Christina here. Today I want to talk a little bit about drones and I want to share some images in this, we'll call it a family album. It is basically a compilation. It's a 20-year history from 56 to 76 of the Strategic Reconnaissance Wing. So this belonged to my father, and he helped implement the heavy equipment recovery operations in Alaska back in the 80s. Now, this one specifically, there's limited to 1,000 copies here, and it's a collection of efforts of UAVs, or unmanned aerial vehicles. So they were used for everything for recon, they took photos, but the initial drones, like the Kettering bug and other bugs, when they were launched, after a certain amount of time, these very primitive onboard controls were activated. They activated like these servos, these sensors, and it would release the wings and it would cause the bug to plummet to the ground, carrying with it about 180 pounds of explosive payload, and that detonated on impact. So these drone operations were very first conceived in about 1849 in Vienna. And at that time, they were just using incendiary balloons. And these true design models weren't really prototyped until about 1907. So, about 10 years later, there was something called the Ruston Procton Aerial Project that created a lot of the photos that you can still see at Camp Reston, Louisiana, and Louisiana University. There's like 247 initial original files, I believe. But also, something interesting about Camp Reston, it was one of the largest POW camps during World War II. In 1943, it had about 4,315 prisoners, and they had 8 smaller work camps associated with it. Anyway, today it houses the archives of these aerial shots from the 40s and onward. So things are about to change, okay? And I'm going to show you some shots of drones over time and the evolution of drones. They've been around for so long, but the rules for drones are about to change. So if you are a drone owner and operator, and your drone is anything worth flying more than a half a pound, 0.55 pound, then you will be affected by these changes. So as of 2023, you will not be able to fly your drone without advertising not only the flight path of your drone, but also your specific ground location. So you're going to have to let the FAA know, just like a pilot. You'll call out your registration number, your speed, your altitude, and you'll probably have to retrofit broadcasting equipment onto your drone. And you'll be forced to do so because there will be no grandfather clause for this. So even though you own a drone already, it won't matter. You will also be affected by these changes. So the FAA is going to work over the next year to identify and establish recognized identification areas, although these areas have yet to be established, and there's really no classification on established flight areas over people. Some flights will be restricted over people. You'll have to have permits to fly in certain areas. There will be a few different classifications. Like you can't fly over a park where lots of people are, because if it falls and it hurts somebody, well, they don't want that. So they're just putting the kibosh on all of it. And you'll even have to have specific permits if you want to fly at night. So time of day, location, et cetera, et cetera. The FAA reported that in 2019, there were over 1.1 million drones purchased as registered, and by 7 million, or it was 7 million in 2020. So it probably does pose some kind of perceived level of threat on national security somehow, but I'm guessing that if you have a drone, it's nothing like what the military has in terms of drone capabilities. And you're not really going to be a threat up there at 25,000 feet in elevation in the way of commercial jets or military craft, or et cetera, et cetera. You're not up there stealing secrets when you're 12 years old in the park flying 50 feet in the air. Okay. So what is this? Well, let's skip the fact that only military drones can carry payload. Okay, let's talk about cameras for a second. Aerial recon cameras can perform different tasks, but for the past 80 years, we've used them for assessing damage, planning, and spying. That's it. So maybe they're concerned about some perceived threat of national security, or us as individual citizens having a better understanding of our world around us, opposed to what Google Earth offers us. So drones have definitely evolved. And by 2022, the strategic reprogramming of many civilian drones will come around, and you're going to have all these hoops to jump through. The future is uncertain. It's still unclear because they're still in the works of creating these laws, but it's about to become a very expensive and very regulated hobby. So let's go ahead and get into a few pages that I want to show you here, okay? The first one is, well, we'll just start at the beginning here, okay? 20 years of progress for drone history. Let's talk about the statistics of drones. Now, most drones were used for photos, as we already said. Some of them were used as decoys as diversionary tactics. And like I said, some of them were just incendiary. So lots of drones existed. And they have evolved incredibly. So using these drones, they would launch them. They'd have these big ramps that they'd launch them off of, or they would achieve liftoff, you know. And once they got up there, they would be controlled either by programming or by remote control. This is one of the programs that Dad implemented in Alaska, was the heavy equipment recovery using helicopters. And they had these giant grappling hooks that they would just go and, like old bush planes and things that went down in the middle of nowhere, they were able to go in and extract them. Planes, drones, didn't really matter. They would go in and they were able to extract the heavy machinery. So that was the recovery. And I want to show you some of the flight suits. First of all, flight suits have certainly evolved over time. Actually, in the beginning, they looked like diving suits. Okay, and then the cameras. These are aerial photography cameras, and the 24-inch focal length reconnaissance camera. Basically, what they would do is you would go up, and they had such a convex lens on them. It had such a pivoted cone that it allowed for horizon to horizon exposure. So they were taking a picture of literally everything in the air, like the ultimate panoramic view. This is one that they took of a base. This was the earthquake in California on February 9th, 1971. This is the intersection of I-5 and 210. You can see the earthquake damage. This is the quake damage from a camera, and you can see there's here and here are landslides currently in progress. So aerial photography has certainly evolved, but it's nothing new. It's something that continues to be used today. And I know for a fact that they're still doing it over the cities as well. This is something that even my city has its own plane that flies over and takes pictures every so often. And they will continue to do so. So if you are a drone owner and operator, you need to be aware of what is about to be implemented as they're working on these new laws through 2021 and 2022. By 2023, you will be seriously affected and potentially fined and or imprisoned if you don't comply.